Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Directors agenda meeting for February 23rd, 2016. I'd like to welcome everybody that is with us in City Hall this afternoon as we go forward with the agenda for our upcoming meeting on March 1st. Before we do that, we've got several presentations to be given this afternoon. And so if that's the case, let's go ahead and get started. The first presentation we have is from our Rock Region Metro Board of Directors, and I see Jared Varner and several of the commissioners with us. Let me go ahead and call on Allie Freeman. It looks like you're on first. Allie, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and City Board members. Pleased to have the opportunity to stand before you today. I want to thank you for allowing us to share details of the Move Central Arkansas plan with you. And as I reflect on this, I'm reminded many years ago when my parents moved here, my father put my mother in the car. She was not a driver. She did not know how to drive at the time. Shortly after their marriage, they moved here in '63. And my father put her in the car, and he got on the other side, the passenger side, and just told her to drive. Imagine what kind of traumatic experience that might have been for her at that time. As she related the story to me, I'm thinking, what would it have been like had we had an adequate transportation system for her at that time and at that day? She had to go to the VA. She was an instructor, a dental hygienist, one of the first, if not the first, at the old VA. And she hated to drive over that. So I was thinking to myself as she relayed that story, what would have happened if we'd had an adequate transportation system that she could access at that time? Fast forward to 1986, and this board, with partners in your infinite wisdom, came together to fund a transit system. I think there was a paradigm shift, and it was thought that there was an opportunity for us to build our city, build downtown Little Rock, and build our city by having a transit system that we could have funding for. And you all got together and you did that, and that showed leadership. Fast forward another several years now, 30 years to be exact, and here we are today. And there's another shift. And it's time for us as a community, as leaders in the community, as individuals who represent your respective areas of representation, to show leadership and move forward again. I want to stress, as we look at our Move Central Arkansas plan, how much community input has been put into this plan. We've worked with dozens of neighborhood groups, elected officials, employers, and academic institutions. We are very thankful to all of our local leaders who understand that we are trying to accomplish for our community by bringing our public transit system up to the 21st century standards. During the Move Central Arkansas process, we participated in an extremely thorough review of our bus system, how to improve it, how to fund those improvements, just to name two of the major points. The plan you'll hear about is the plan we collectively felt is the best option for Central Arkansas in terms of feasibility and cost and efficiency. On March 1st, our community has a choice on whether to support this plan and provide Rock Region Metro with the flexibility it needs to make the most effective and efficient transportation available to more citizens. We as a community have a lot of demands on our resources. It goes without said. But surely for a quarter-cent sales tax, for literally 25 cents for every $100 you spend, we can invest in a system that gets more workers to their jobs, that gets more students to their education. And I work at a career and technical education facility which many students use the city bus to come to, Metropolitan Career and Technical Center. We have a stop right in front of our facility. A system that gets more seniors to their health care and that provides people with disabilities accessibility to their community. I particularly want to ask you today to think about the facts surrounding our public transit system. For people who do not use the system or know a lot about it, they may not see the value in meeting basic transportation needs for the people in our community who use public transit. But I can tell you, not only do you benefit from more people having access to the economic drivers of our area, but you also benefit from less cars being on the road when others use public transit, and from the avoidance of air quality issues that could cost our region potential business. I also want to make it clear that our current funding structure for Rock Region Metro is a 30-year-old, 3 decades old funding structure. And it does not allow the agency to be as efficient or as innovative as we could be. As a board member, I have a front row seat to see what the agency has accomplished in the last few years. When you consider all the achievements the agency has seen in just the last 6 months, introducing compressed natural gas buses, free Wi-Fi, a bus stop texting system with real-time arrival information, a new website, a free mobile app, and 55 new shelters on the way. I can tell you without hesitation that I am confident in our organization's ability to continue to modernizing our transit system for the betterment of our community. But that can't happen without your support and our community working together to make Central Arkansas the best community it can be. Just this week in the Arkansas Times, you have 3 examples of some of our writers, a graduate student, a ULR professor with a PhD, and a substitute teacher, just to name a few. Those writers and others like them are making Central Arkansas a better place to live every day. And they deserve a community that is willing to plan for future growth by making the investments now needed to properly fund a modern transit system. Again, you may not use public transit, but as the Downtown Little Rock Partnership and other groups have noted, investment in our public transit system is a win-win for our entire community. Please tell your constituents about this plan and your family and friends, and make sure they understand what's at stake for our community when they vote on March 1st. Collectively, we can get this done. With that, I'm going to yield to Mr. Varner, who has a few additional comments he would like to make at this time.
Thank you, Allie.
Thank you very
Welcome,
much.
Jared.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Obviously, as Mr. Freeman mentioned, quite a bit has changed since the last time we presented formally to the board. New buses, new brand, 33 new shelters are in the process of being installed in the city of Little Rock. Wi-Fi, real-time mobile app to help our customers know exactly when the bus is going to arrive. But we've done at this point, about all we can do as far as modernizing our system is concerned within the current constraints, without focusing on the services that we're offering. And so that's really, I just want to give you an update on Move Central Arkansas and the service plan that the Rock Region Metro Board of Directors has approved. But because we are continually reviewing the services that we offer and we continually receive feedback from our customers, nothing we're showing you today is set in stone. Implementation of this plan is a process, just like any other planning exercise and implementation that this city goes through. But I do want to give you an idea of some of the strategies that we want to employ that we think can make our system more important and increase ridership within your city. I want to make it easier for people to use our system. I want to make it easier for them to understand it and how it works. Expand the route network. We have job growth areas that are underserved at this point. We need to increase service levels across the board, and we need to match service types with demand. So if we could get the next slide. Again, the Move Central Arkansas planning process was about an 18-month planning process. Really not much has changed since June when I met one-on-one with many of you. But I do want to give you just a rundown of some of the service improvements that we think could have a significant impact in the city of Little Rock. Good, next slide. We know that there's a lot of things that are going right in this system. We're carrying nearly 3 million passengers a year, but there's some tweaks that need to be made, and I think there's some significant capital investments that could be made to really provide a transformative level of service for the city of Little Rock. So we know we need to invest in major corridors. Next slide. And so what does that look like? What are major investments from a transit perspective look like? Well, for us, they look like bus rapid transit. This is light rail on tires. If you travel to Dallas or to Charlotte or to Denver, you've ridden light rail, visiting those cities, we want to scale it to Little Rock and provide bus rapid transit service. These are services that are frequent, 10-minute service at a minimum during peak periods. Their service is offered with really stations rather than just bus stops. Every corner you would have a bus station, every half mile, 3/4 of a mile. You'd have predictive arrival information at the stop, similar to what you experience in other cities. And in some areas, where possible, you would look to deploy dedicated lanes where possible. Next slide. Some of the areas that we think that this service could be warranted are signified on this map by E1 and E2. Basically, these are connecting downtown, the Capitol Avenue corridor, connecting in with the VA and UAMS, then West Markham along West Markham to the St. Vincent area, what I would call Midtown there at University and Markham. And then Route E1 would then come back along 12th Street. So that's one route, one set of corridors that we would look to serve with this type of service. The other would actually go outbound the same way and go westbound the same direction, but then tie in University. These are critical corridors. This type of service would really bring some of the major institutions in this city together, providing a very high level of service that could also bring in tremendous amounts of economic development. Next slide. There's some cities that this has been deployed in: Eugene, Oregon, Cleveland, Ohio, Kansas City even. There's a list now of about 25 cities that are working towards bus rapid transit: Fort Collins, Colorado, Indianapolis, Louisville, Albuquerque, Snohomish County, Washington. Again, this is a component of the program that is very aggressive. It could be transformative, but at the end of the day, would depend on whether or not we can accomplish dedicated lanes on at least half of these corridors, but it's something to consider and something that the community, I think, is pretty excited about, at least the folks we're talking to. Next slide. Again, like I mentioned, there's a lot of services that we're offering now that make sense, that people are riding, but we know we need to improve frequencies on many routes in some of our other critical corridors. Next slide. Right now, we have some routes that operate every hour and 15 minutes. And from a transit perspective, that honestly isn't acceptable. People are just not going to engineer their lives and schedule their lives around a bus route that's every hour and 15 minutes. So we know we need to do better. Some corridors need even more service than that. You'll see here, we're looking at West Markham, 12th Street, Canis, Asher, some of these critical corridors that currently have bus services that are performing well. We need better service. We need 20-minute service in many of these routes. And then again, we need to create a hierarchy of services. So depending on the demand, depending on the densities, we would have higher frequency in more dense areas, would have a little bit less frequency in others. But we need a system that makes sense and that provides the right amount of service to the correct areas. Also, as far as improving frequencies, we also need to run later in the evenings. Right now, most of our routes end between 7 and 8 o'clock. The services that we want to deploy will run at least until 10 on most routes. Again, the folks who ride the bus, their schedules aren't 8 to 5. They're working on Sundays, they're working on Saturday, and they're working in the evenings. And so not only do we want to improve frequencies, we want to run service later, and we want to provide better service on the weekends than what we're able to offer right now. Next slide. We also know that obviously our region, our county, and our city have changed dramatically since 1986. But really our services haven't changed all that much. And the services that we do deploy are typically, we're a bit of a one-trick pony. It's a large bus operating in some of our neighborhoods that might not necessarily need that type of service. So if you go to the next slide. We want to really right-size the service to the different neighborhoods that we serve. For instance, we have certain fixed routes now that just aren't carrying very many people. But because of our funding structure, we're continuing to provide the same type of service. But we want to offer flex zones in key parts of our city, areas that the fixed route currently serves, but is just not doing a very good job of it. So we'd have flex zones that would offer dial-a-ride type service. So the bus would come to your door, pick you up, and take you somewhere else within that zone, more than likely connecting you in with the rest of the system. So that we're not running large buses, in some instances much lower than capacity. We need to be more efficient, more effective in the way we're doing things. So we want to offer flex zones. Another part of right-sizing our service, we need to offer community shuttles in some of our less dense communities, some of our areas that don't necessarily need a large fixed route bus. And again, this relates to the city of Little Rock because a lot of your constituents, the folks that we talk to, they may live in Little Rock, but they may work in other areas. So we're looking at deploying community shuttles in Maumelle, Sherwood, Jacksonville. We also want to offer a community shuttle in West Little Rock to better connect people to jobs in those areas. And so these are smaller vehicles. These are shuttles with smaller vehicles that are more nimble, that would operate on a fixed route, but would also deviate off of that fixed route to pick up our seniors and people with disabilities, creating greater access to services and to employment centers from those who cannot access fixed routes. Another thing that we know that we need to do is improve the services that we have down Chenal Parkway. There are a lot of businesses. We're hearing from Kroger that has 80 open positions right now, and other retail establishments down Chenal Parkway that do not have, they're understaffed. They don't have the number of people getting access to their stores. And so we want to offer a West Little Rock Express that will allow people to get to jobs in West Little Rock, but also to allow residents in West Little Rock to park and ride and let us do the driving, and so they can enjoy the free Wi-Fi and a much less headache in their normal commute. We also, in some parts of the city, we want to offer transfer opportunities outside of the city center. Part of modernizing what we do is getting away from the traditional hub and spoke system to where everything comes downtown. Trip links are just too long for a lot of people because they come downtown, transfer to a bus, and go somewhere else. And so we want to offer mini hubs around University at UALR, a mini hub at West Markham and in University, and really start to funnel people in, hopefully to a BRT system that will become the backbone and allow people to take shorter trips and to connect in different ways rather than having every bus come downtown. So we need that flexibility. We need to modernize the types of services that we offer. Next slide. Also, one thing we've clearly been working on and we want to continue to work on is modernizing the customer experience. What does that look like? Next slide. At buses, Wi-Fi, a real-time mobile app. We need to transition to how we pay our fares. People boarding the bus and paying cash takes a tremendous amount of time. So we want to work with our riders to transition as much as we can to using modern technology to make their lives easier. Next slide. And finally, part of Move Central Arkansas, our hope was we would develop a menu of service options that we could deploy, a menu of funding options that we could then consider. Unfortunately, in the state of Arkansas, there's one form of funding for transit, and that's a quarter-cent sales tax. So it's limited to a sales tax, it's limited to a quarter-cent, and that's why on the March 1 ballot you see a quarter-cent sales tax to fund your transit system. Next slide. And with that, I'd like to turn it over, if possible, to Jimmy Moses, another one of our board members, a representative from the city of Little Rock, to say a few words, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Welcome, Jimmy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Jimmy Moses. Normally, when I come down here, I tell you that I'm in the real estate business and working on some project, typically downtown. First, though, I'm here not for that. I'm here because I chair the committee to vote to connect for our 25-cent or our funding change to the system. You all have been great in your leadership, and we on the Transit Authority greatly appreciate the support you've provided the citizens of Little Rock, and for that matter, those in our county, to have a transit system. We're thankful for it, and I think you can tell from what Allie Freeman told you and now Jared Varner that we do a lot with the dollars that are available. But I think of this program much like I think of the Central Arkansas Library System 20 or 25 years ago. I call it the pre-Bobby Roberts era and the post-Bobby Roberts era, if you will. And I just ask you to think about the library system that we had in our city 20 or 25 years ago when we had no dedicated funding. We were led by good folks with well-intentioned efforts, but at the end of the day, we had no dedicated funding. So our vision was limited and the resources were limited. And so we had one of the worst library systems in this part of the country. Was that a good thing for Little Rock? I don't think so. Fortunately, the wisdom of our community We let the voters decide, and they voted a dedicated funding mechanism for the CAL system. And 20 years later, as we look at our system today, we have one of the great systems in this part of the country. And I think we have the potential to do the exact same thing with our transit system. A friend of mine asked me the other day, what are you doing working on the bus system? And I said, well, let me tell you what I'm doing. There are 3 million riders that use that system every day. A lot of them have no other way to get to work, much less to school, or, God forbid, their illness forces them into the hospital. Without good public transit, we're a city that's weakened. We don't compete well as an economic unit. And I believe that one of the important components of a quality city is to have great universities, to have a strong and vibrant downtown, and to have a great first-class public transit system. And we can do that. We have the capacity to do that. The other thing I said is when I was queried the other day about the fact that the buses seem to drive around empty most of the time. Isn't that true? You know what? It's kind of true. But I asked my friend, I said, is that your car over there? He said, yeah, as a matter of fact, it is. I said, what's it doing right now? Well, it's parked. I said, well, how many hours a day do you typically drive that car? And he said, well, to and from work, I live in Midtown Little Rock, 30 minutes. And then there are trips, I need that car another 30, 45 minutes. So I said, maybe an hour a day. How many hours are there in the day? 24. So 23 out of the 24 hours that my friend has an automobile, it's parked somewhere and not utilized. So the same is true for the bus system. It's primarily used at rush hour and when demand is at its peak. And yes, a lot of the time, buses don't ride around full, but neither are freeways or the automobiles that travel on them. But for the 3 million people that depend on the service, and for the economic generation that will be derived from a quality system, we need to be leaders in this community and step up and support this tax. As I said when I started, I'm really thankful for what you all do for this city just every day. And in particular, we're thankful for what you do for the ridership of the Rock Region Metro. And I hope you will join with us, as Director Webb has, being our co-chair for this endeavor, and support this. You wield a lot of influence among your constituents, and we're very much in need and hope that you'll favor us with your vote and your support and encouraging your constituents to get out and do the same. Thanks for letting us be here today. We'll be glad to answer questions.
Thank you, Jimmy. Director Fortson, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a question. I just a reflection, I suppose. The board knows this because I've mentioned it before, but back in 1999, this city board created something called Vision Little Rock, which was Vision 2000 for Little Rock, which was designed to sort of follow up what had happened with future Little Rock and look at a lot of areas of the city and talk about what needed to be done. I was privileged to co-chair the Transportation Work Group, and we went over as I recall, about a 14-month period. And we had hearings, and Allie, I could close my eyes, and a lot of what you said tonight about the bus service and transportation in this town, we heard back then. We had experts from out of town. We had executives from the hospitals who depend on the buses for their employees. We had sight and mobility disadvantaged people who talked about how they needed them. And interestingly enough, in March of 2000, our task force came out with this recommendation. CATA, which was the name then, needs dedicated funding to support its operations, not annual appropriation. Finding dedicated funding would allow CATA to plan for and develop new routes, expand existing routes to match growth, and begin new services such as feeder routes for other modes of transit in the future. So a whole lot of what was said 16 years ago maybe is coming to fruition now. I support what you're trying to do. I applaud the effort, and I wish you good luck.
Director Campuris, you're next, please.
Gina and I are too old to be around here because the preceding exercise went through in future Little Rock the same gyrations, and we all said the same thing. If you don't have good public transit, you don't have a great city. And we failed future Little Rock, failed the second time, and I'm with Gene. I'm supporting what y'all want to do. I think it is that element of our community that is not very glamorous. I mean, you know, it's just not one of those things you want to stand up and say, boy, this is the neatest thing in the world. But it's one of the things that makes the city. It's the heart of the city. It's what really sends people around and lets everybody have the opportunity to enjoy our community and learn from our community and prosper in our community. So very much like Gene, I support your endeavor. I hope everybody else will, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment, I don't know whether it was Ally that talked about and showed pictures of comparison of other cities as far as transportation. Sure. And what's the population? Can you tell me the population of some of those towns where you showed photos?
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the information in front of me. I didn't bring it with me as far as the Kansas City is a little bit larger. Other ones we talked about were, I mentioned Albuquerque. Eugene, Oregon is probably similar. They're a college town. Some of the ones that I talked about, I think, are a little bit larger.
Okay. I asked you that because I was concerned the population-wise, but I do support the program, but I think everybody knows that were you the one that spoke to the Downtown Neighborhood Association? And I think at that meeting I mentioned about the larger buses. Are you all anticipating on getting smaller buses?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. One thing that we know we need to do is tailor the service to the community to make sure that we're being as efficient as we can. So some of those areas right now where ridership isn't as high, we would deploy smaller buses to better meet the needs and the demands of those communities.
I ask that because I live 1 block from the bus line and I see so many buses empty all day long. They talked about the capacity maybe in the work hours, like early in the morning or in the evenings, but we've got too many empty big buses running, and that should be a cost to the company.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that we know we need to do is, again, tailor the service to demand. And the current funding structure just makes it very difficult to make those changes. So one thing we're looking at doing is having really a true peak period and off-peak period level of service. So, a route may be 30 minutes during peak, it may be an hour in off-peak, just because the demand isn't there. So with flexibility of funding, we would do a much better job, I think, of being able to allocate the resources in the times that people are traveling.
My last comment is that I support what Eric said about his mom, because I too was a nurse at the VA, and we had to walk through a path or something. So thanks, and I do support the program.
Thank you.
Director Webb, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I looked up one of those cities on Google the other day, Director Hendricks, and Eugene, Oregon was about 160,000, if I remember correctly. So it's smaller than Little Rock when I looked it up. And just a couple of comments. And we've talked about this before, like when Director Fortson mentioned, the work that they did in Vision Little Rock. And when we had the privilege to go hear that panel of mayors who were mayors of the most successful cities in the country talk about the 8 things that made their cities great 21st century cities. And one of the things all 8 of them said was a good transit system. And having been a restaurant owner in this city for a number of years and talking to my fellow restaurant owners, one of the things that our employees told us all the time, they told us 2 things. One, they needed the later routes, and they needed routes that could be shorter so they wouldn't have to go, like you said, downtown and then transfer, because having that flexibility would give them time to either work more hours, or it would give them the time they needed with their families, which is really important. They spent so much time getting to and from work. So I applaud you on that. And I'll just end this with the other day when I rode the bus and I texted, like you said, and it said my bus was going to be there in 2 minutes, and it was there in 2 minutes. So thank you for having that available and for having it working so well. So I'm excited about this, and I think our city is very fortunate to have you leading Rock Region, and the board, we're very fortunate to have the folks on the board that we do with the vision, so thank you.
Director Adcock, you're recognized, please.
Jimmy, I've got one better on yours, on the buses are empty. I like to ask people how many people they see driving downtown with these big SUVs, one person driving, and then they drive to a parking lot and sit all day. If they just ride that bus, the bus would be crowded, and also we wouldn't have to have as many parking lots downtown. So, they see a bus that is empty, but they don't see all the SUVs and the big pickups and everything with one person behind the wheel. I worked for 14 years with Welfare to Work, with women who had to depend on the bus to get them to school, had to depend on the bus to get a child to daycare, and then catch another bus to go to work or to school. And in Southwest Little Rock, we have 2 bus routes, basically. But if you go to work on Baseline Road and you live over on 65th Street, you have to come all the way downtown, change a bus. We had a woman that lived on Scott Hamilton that worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield, and she worked every day. She went to work at 6 o'clock in the morning to get her child to daycare, get back downtown, take another bus to go to work and everything. And, we've got to make it more convenient for people because none of us would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work at 8 o'clock. So I think that this is great. I think it's something that we need. I think it should say on the signs that this is about jobs. This is only a quarter of a penny. I don't know about y'all, but if you're walking down the street and you look down and there's a penny laying down there, the majority of us today does not even stoop down to get that penny. Now, y'all start paying a penny sales tax for the city of Little Rock. And how many of you have gone without a hamburger or anything at the grocery store because you're giving this city a penny? And this is only a quarter of a penny. So I think we need to look at the amount this is and think of all it would do and all the people it would help. We have people out Chenal that can't get employees because people can't get there unless they have an automobile. So we need to take this down to the basic needs of the people and understand that we don't even pick up a penny off the ground, but yet we won't give a quarter of a penny to help others. So I think that we need to look at it as how can we help the other people in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Adcock. Vice Mayor Hines?
Thank you. Jared, Allie, Jimmy, thanks for coming to speak to us. Jared and I had a meeting yesterday and brought it to his attention. One of my neighbors is the zone manager for Kroger, and they've got about 80 job openings out there that they struggle because our westernmost terminus is, I think, Markham and Chenal. So I think the plan is good and well thought out. I hope you guys have done enough legwork to convince the voters, especially the folks out on the western edge of the city who don't actually have much of that service yet. But the best of luck, and hopefully we'll find out a good outcome here on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hines. Let me add my thought. I, too, am supportive of the idea of a dedicated transit tax. It's very important, and as the city grows, that dedicated a 0.25% will also grow, which really portends as our population grows. And every year I do the mayor's car-free challenge and challenge people to ditch their keys and for an entire week to find another way to get to where they need to go. And it's always been interesting to me to do that. I'm usually hanging out at the bus stop, and I'm a little paranoid about missing the bus, so I'm usually there early. And invariably, there'll be 3 or 4 people who drive by me that don't have any passengers in their car, and they're offering me a ride. Of course, I politely decline because I want to try and send a message about how important it is that we use our public transit. And so I guess I would tell you that, nobody likes paying taxes, nobody likes adding taxes, but I'll tell you that the tax burden that we have here in our city is substantially less than the local tax burden and the entire tax burden of most of the cities in Northwest Arkansas. All the cities that, you don't want to think we compete with some of those cities up there or the collective region up there, virtually all of them are at a total of 2 cents in terms of their local city tax. And even with this, we will still be at a quarter of a penny less than that. We would be at 1.75. And if what that means is that we can take our city and really bring it and vault it into with a first-class transit system, it's going to do a lot for the economic development and the job opportunities and job growth in our city. So I would just encourage all of us to get out and exercise your right to vote March 1st. And certainly it sounds like there's strong support by many members of the board here. So let's all try and talk to our friends and neighbors and see if we can't convince them that this is a very wise investment. Thank you all for coming. Jared, Ally, Jimmy, thank you all very much. Oh, yes. Director Adcock,
Yes,
comment, please.
Mayor, they do not have to wait till March the 1st. They can go tomorrow and vote.
They can early vote. That's right. You bet. Director Hendricks.
Introduce the commissioners, because I just asked Mr. Carpenter, could they, the people that serve on the commission, are they here? Other than
Well,
Jim
two of them
Ann?
are sitting right next to you.
I need to know who they are. Can they
Sarah
introduce?
Linehan and Bruce Moore, do you want to stand and be recognized? Do we have any other commissioners here? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to know who these people, I know Jimmy and Ellie.
Okay, before we have our next presentation, let me mention to all of you who are in attendance that we have some guests visiting us from Ukraine, the country of Ukraine. If you'd wave and let us know you come. Most of these individuals I met with yesterday, and they've had a very busy agenda, talking to a variety of people. They're very much into the ethics of how procurement and expenditures and the financial dealings of the city are handled, and how we deal with issues of conflict of interest. I had a very good conversation with them yesterday, and I know they're meeting with a lot of other state and local agencies as well. So we want to welcome you. This is an agenda meeting. It's not a formally convened meeting, but it's an opportunity for us to discuss the various items that we're going to be voting on at our meeting the following Tuesday. So that's what we are doing today. Okay, we have one more presentation, and this is a presentation from Central Arkansas Water. Let me recognize and welcome the new Executive Director of Central Arkansas Water, Tad Bohannon. Welcome, Tad.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Directors, Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Moore. I will introduce some commissioners that we have here from Central Arkansas Water. We have 4 of the 7 here today. There's Marie Bernard Miller from Little Rock, Jay Hartman from Little Rock, Tony Kendall, who's one of the North Little Rock representatives, and Dr. Roby Robertson, who's also a Little Rock representative. We have 3 that could not make it today. I am honored to be here as the new CEO of Central Arkansas Water. I was telling somebody today, I've been down here several times before in many different roles, and I don't think I've ever been as nervous as I am right now as the new CEO. And so, but we're here to talk about a couple of things, if you want to go on. And I want to talk about one issue just because it's in the national headlines, and I want to talk about proposed rates that were adopted by the Central Arkansas Water Board of Commissioners on December the 10th, because that's what I was asked here to come talk about. And the first thing I want to talk about is lead and how it contributes to water quality and the issues that are in the national agenda right now. And I won't take too much time on it, but if you want to go to the next. As we all know, there has been horrible events that have occurred in Flint, Michigan. They have tainted water with lead. There was I don't even want to get into all the allegations that have been made and the different issues that have been made. What I want to do is address and maybe answer some questions that maybe citizens in Little Rock and North Little Rock that are served by Central Arkansas Water have, so we can address those issues. And if you could go to the next slide, please. You know, lead comes in drinking water from a variety of sources. I can tell you this, when it leaves Central Arkansas Water's treatment plants, there is no detectable lead in the water. And then as it travels through the pipes and heads towards the residences and gets to the residences, there's various places that it can pick up lead. One that is commonly reported national is the service line between the water main and the house. Prior to 1930, lead was a common source of the service line from the water main up to the house. Little Rock is fortunate. Even before the lead and copper rule was in place, the leaders of Little Rock Municipal Water Works had the foresight to go in and start replacing all the lead water lines. At one time, prior to the 1980s, there was probably 15,000 lead service lines in Little Rock Municipal Water Works' water system. And those were all replaced. And so over time, those have been replaced. And so, knock on wood, we actually went out and did some test digs in the last month to verify some things. To make sure that what we thought had been replaced had been replaced. And so far, we're finding that everything had been replaced as we actually thought it would. So you know that how this issue is for me. I was appointed as CEO on Thursday. My first act after being appointed on Thursday was to close the offices on Friday, because that was the Friday in January we had the ice storm. So I was favored by all the employees after that date. But then on Monday morning at 10 o'clock, we had a lead meeting. We had a meeting with people from the distribution staff, from the water quality department, from different areas to get together to make sure that we were on top of this lead issue. All right? The second issue that comes in is, for a time period, there was lead in the solder. And this is when the lead actually gets to your house. It's actually in the house plumbing, and there was solder in lead that made it easier to work, and there's lead in the solder. And then there's lead in brass fixtures in the house. But we can do things to help correct it if you'll go to the next slide, okay? Lead gets into the water through the corrosiveness of water. As the water's thrown through the pipe, it picks up elements of the pipe and brings that through, and lead is picked up. And it can be adjusted. We can adjust the aggressiveness, and we do that. We are actively involved to keep the aggressiveness of the water down. We adjust the pH and the alkalinity to reduce the water, and we add phosphates. Now, this is what you've heard of from the Flint, Michigan case of where they wanted to save money, so they didn't add phosphates. And what phosphates do in the pipe is they basically create a film on the inside of the pipe that creates a barrier between the water flowing through the pipe and the lead, if there happens to be any in the pipe, to stop the corrosiveness from sucking the lead out of the pipe. And so we've added phosphates even before the lead and copper rules were in place. We were adding phosphates to the water to protect the citizens. Okay? Other things that can let it, there's where improper electrical grounding, if there's electrical current running through the pipe, it can contribute. But if we find those areas, we contact the homeowners, we let them know of the problems, and we have them correct it. So let's go to the next slide, please. So, lead and copper rules were introduced in the 90s. Just to give you an idea, these are up there, that the definition of lead-free water has changed. Okay? Early on, lead-free was supposed to be less than 0.2% in solder and 8% in fixtures. Then in 2000, it was reduced to 4% in fixtures, and by 2011, it's 0.25% is what's allowed in the fixtures. But if there's older fixtures in the home, there's a possibility that there's lead in those older fixtures. At the same time, we have the phosphates flowing through the water to help to protect them. So under the lead and copper rule promulgated by the EPA, we have to test. And initially, when we started testing, we had to test every year, and we had to test 100 houses that were highly susceptible to lead contamination. And we tested those starting in 1992. And because of our good results and what have you, we now test every 3 years, and we test in 50 houses. And I'm going to have those results up there in just a minute. But what they look at is they say, okay, you've tested all the houses. How did you score? And as long as we have less than 15 parts per million, then we are not required to take action by the EPA. That's deemed by the Environmental Protection Agency to be low enough that we don't need to do anything. It's 15 parts per million under a 90 percentile, okay? Flint was exceeding that, and that's why they're having the difficulties that they're having. But that's where we are. Next slide, please. Now, here's the results of our testing. When you look at the 90th percentiles, we're not 15 parts per million. We are 1 or 2 are non-detectable since 1992 as you're going through. In June of 13, which was our last test because we started testing on Thursdays, we were at 4 parts per million. As you notice, there was one outlier there that was kind of high, and we went back and we retested, and it came back at 3 parts per million. So all of our tests of our water treatments that we're using, the measures that we're taking to reduce the corrosivity of the water, to help keep lead out of the water, seem to be working, seem to be taking effect. and we're protecting the water for the health and the safety of our citizens and drinking our water. So there's that. One of the things that's important to remember is that we don't test the water, okay? We help select with the Department of Health the houses that are going to be tested. We take the test kit to the homeowner. We give the homeowner instructions on how to take the sample out of their faucets. They take the sample, then that sample is turned into the Arkansas Department of Health, and the Arkansas Department of Health does the testing and publishes all the results. And the reason I want to make that point is so there's no funny business going on. There's no opportunity to fix the results. There's no opportunity to say, okay, we're gonna doctor the results so that we can be in compliance, which is one of the allegations that's been going on up in Flint, Michigan. So next slide, please. So differences, we have a consistent, high-quality source of water. We're all proud of our lake sources with Lake Winona and Lake Maumelle. We have excellent water treatment plants. We do a good job of treating the water. We reduce the corrosivity of the water, getting it to the homes. We have consistently low levels of detecting lead when we do our monitoring. And again, the Arkansas Department of Health is doing the actual testing for the lead to determine whether or not there's any lead there. So last slide on the lead issue, and then we'll get to that. 2016 is our test year from 2013 to 2016. Just to assure ourselves and the drinking public, we're going to expand our testing sites voluntarily to test more homes to make sure that we are comfortable with our test results and that we are doing everything we need to do to protect the water consumer. But if any of them has any questions, I welcome them to call Central Arkansas Water Qualities Department, or they can call the Arkansas Department of Health directly. We are working on public relations pieces to get this information out to the public to make sure that they have it available and that they can access the information if they need it. Next slide. Any questions about the lead part? Okay, let's go straight into rates then. On December the 10th, the Central Arkansas Water Board of Commissioners adopted new rates for years 16, 17, 18, and 19. Okay? We sent notice over to the cities, and those rates become in effect 90 days after December 11th, unless both cities vote no. That's how the consolidation agreement is set up and what happens with the rates. They've been approved by the commission, and we move forward from there. And we're going to get more into the rates, but I just want to talk on a couple of things real quick first. Next slide, please. What this is not about. These rates are not about increases, huge increases to our O&M budget. Okay? These rates are also not about increases for employee pay and benefits. We're not coming here saying we need a bunch of extra money so we can pay our employees more money. All right? That's what these are not about. Next slide. What do these rate increases address? Well, first of all, they address declining consumption. Everybody is getting more efficient washers. Everybody's getting more efficient dishwashers. Everybody's using less water. We have lots of advertising that we do asking people to use less water. So we have declining consumption. Now remember, within that declining consumption, the fixed costs don't vary. We still have to have the same number of meter readers. We still have to have the same number of people operating water treatment plants. We still have to have the same number of people repairing broken lines, but we have declining consumption. And historically, water rates have been based on consumption, so that's an issue. We do have some O&M escalation, 1.9% per year. Historically, CAW has held its water rate, O&M escalation below that amount, all right? So we do have a little bit of water rate O&M escalation over those 4 years, okay? And then we need to begin addressing old infrastructure, aging infrastructure. Next slide, please. The Engineers Academy came out and gave America a D+ on infrastructure. That's roads, water lines, sewer lines, everything. Next slide, please. The water industries came out, and there's been several different reports over the last couple of years estimating the amount of money that's needed to replace infrastructure. And it's all on a nationwide scale, so we'll try to look at it for Little Rock a little bit. Okay, next one. This graph here shows miles of pipe laid per decade. And if you look at 1900, you say, well, there's only 41 miles of pipe. And most of that pipe, we're going to say, is 100-year pipe, which means it expires its useful life, if it expired 100 years, all right, in 2000. 2010, 2020, you see that. Then you jump into the 40s and 50s, and we're going to look at it, but one of the interesting things about the 40s and 50s and 60s is the pipe they started using wasn't 100-year pipe, it was 50 and 60-year pipe, which means it was coming to the end of its useful life in 2010, 2020, about the same time that the 100-year pipe was coming to the end of its useful life. Now, I don't want to, go ahead and go to the next slide. This shows the number of miles of each type of pipe that we have in Central Arkansas Water System. We have about 2,300 miles of pipe. Cast iron, you'll see up there, we have pipe ranging in age from 16 to 114 years. Galvanized iron, we have pipe ranging in 17 to 114 years. So we have been working and we're tracking our pipe to know how old it is. All right, and so we've been keeping track of that part of it. Next slide, please. You can also look at, we've been replacing pipe. We've been replacing pipe about 4.1 miles per year out of our current rate structure. This is replacing pipes out of rates. Okay, and if you go to the next slide, we go back, whoops, sorry. All right, so if you go 2,300 miles, 4.1 miles of pipe per year, that's about 500 years for every mile of pipe. And we all know that our pipe's not going to last 500 years. So we need to increase our replacement rate. Next slide, please. The red lines on this map are pipe that have exceeded its useful life. It's all pipe that was 100 years old. Now, we talk a lot about 100-year-old pipe. And I don't want anybody, and I'm going to get into it a little bit more, to think about that we're running out, and every time a pipe reaches 100 years old, we're going, oh, we got to replace that piece of pipe. It's reached its end of useful life, time to jerk it out of the ground and replace it. All right? What you do need to think about is it's like the timing belt on your car, or it's like the tires on your car, that you know that it's going to last about so long. And if it's critical, if you're getting ready to drive cross-country, and that timing belt on your car that was supposed to be replaced at 80,000 miles has now got 120,000 miles on it, you may say, you know what, before I strike out across country, I'm going to go ahead and replace that timing belt. Because I don't want to break down on the side of the freeway because the cost is too great. The inconvenience is too great. Well, it's the same thing with pipe. Just because it's gotten to be 100 years old or it's reached the end of its life, if it's a 50-year-old pipe, doesn't mean we jump out there and replace it. It means we look at it and we do an assessment and we say, what's the cost? What's the real cost if this pipe should break? Is it serving a hospital? Is it serving schools? Is it a critical pipe for infrastructure for a central business district? And so can we afford the inconvenience? Can we afford to wait for it to break? Or is that a pipe that we need to get on in front of ahead of time and not let it break? Okay, next slide. Now, the next slide is spontaneous breaks per 100 pip. And this is where we talk about what kind of pipe. And if you will see there, it shows galvanized pipe is way above the national benchmarks for pipe break, and so is asbestos cement pipe. Okay, and we've been having historically way more breaks than we need to. And I'm going to step right over here, and I brought show and tell. Now, this is a piece of galvanized pipe, and it is not 100 years old. This piece of galvanized pipe was installed in 1967. And you can see it has 4 clamps on it from where it's been repaired. And we said, you know what, the repair cost for this piece of pipe is getting too great. We need to go ahead and replace this piece of pipe. And that's the type of analysis that CAW does when it's looking at different projects and saying, and this piece of pipe, by the way, is from Southwest Little Rock. Okay, installed in 67. So it's not that we're just jumping out there and saying we've got to replace all the pipe. It's that we're looking and doing analysis. Okay, next slide, please. Now we'll go on one more, please. All right, so when you look at spontaneous breaks per 100 miles of pipe, you can see that we're again above the national benchmark set by the American Water Works Association. And you can also see, though, that the blue lines is the number of breaks per mile for pipe that has exceeded its useful life. The green bars are for pipe that has not exceeded its useful life. So there is a significant increase in the number of breaks per 100 miles of pipe once that pipe reaches its useful life, or estimated useful life. And that replacement is more expensive than replacement if we can plan it. If we can think ahead and say, oh, we need to think about replacing this pipe, we need to schedule it. And it's more expense just getting the job done, and it's more expense society-wise because of unexpected interruptions in water supply. If we can schedule pipe, we can tell people, oh, we're going to turn off your water tomorrow. You might want to do your washing today because we're going to have to turn off your water tomorrow, and it's going to be off for 4 hours between this hour and this hour. And you're not going to be in the shower. If we have a water break that's not expected and we have to turn off water, we catch people in the shower with their hair full of soap. We catch businesses unexpected for the water supply change because we had a water break and we had to do it. So there's a societal cost if we aren't able to schedule the replacements. Okay, next slide, please. As of today, we are about $130 million behind in asset replacement. If you look at the pipe that's reached its useful life, we are about $130 million behind. And if we keep replacing at the current rate that we're replacing at $1.4 million per year, as our system ages, you can see how that line goes. So one of the things that we've been looking at is how can we flatten that line so we don't get so far behind we can't keep up. Next slide, please. And if we're able to increase capital improvement dollars in pipe replacement to $5 million a year, by $5 million a year to 1.6, we get pretty close to flattening that line out, but not quite. Next slide. If we go to additional $8 million per year and we get to 9.4, then we start bringing it down. And next slide, please. If we go an additional $10 million per year, or 11.4 million by 2038, we've eliminated all the back need. Now, I'm not here today to say we need to raise rates to get an additional $10 million per year, but we're going to have to continue to look at that over the long haul to make sure that we keep up with depreciation and make sure that we keep up with adequate asset replacement. But we are talking about we need to increase rates some to provide additional funds for capital replacement. Next slide, please. I included this slide because I wanted you all to see the type of analysis that we look at for every piece of pipe. And we go through and we look at all the pipe and we look at all these different factors and we come up with some scores about how critical is this pipe. The more critical the pipe is to our system, the higher the score, and what's the condition. The worse the condition, the higher the score. And then we come up with total scores and then we estimate replacement cost. So we're not just going, we got a little money, let's go over and replace this pipe. We're actually trying to address the most critical pipes. Right now, we're replacing a pipe that goes under Highway 10 that comes down from the Ozark Treatment Plant and runs under Highway 10, Cantrell Road, and then runs across through Riverdale. And you say, well, one, it's an old pipe. It needs to be replaced. Two, if it blew, it would knock a crater in Highway 10 so big we'd be 2 weeks before we could get traffic back through it. And we don't want to shut down Highway 10 with a big old crater in it caused by the water pressure coming through that pipe. So we're replacing it right now. We're doing a bore under the highway. It does, because we're able to schedule it and not wait for a blow. It doesn't interrupt traffic flow. People don't even know we're there. Okay, but we're working on it. Next slide. Just a quick slide of some of the work that the guys are doing out in the field. The slide with the where they're in the middle of the street there, that's right out in front of the courthouse, where they worked right up against the trolley lines. Again, we were able to schedule it. We were able to do the work. We didn't interfere with the trolley lines. We didn't tear up the trolley lines. So there wasn't that additional cost because we were able to get in there before the pipes actually blew. Next slide, please. So what's the proposal? A little bit of history. In 2015, we had no rate increase for either retail or wholesale customers. In 2016, which we're into now, again, there's no rate increase for retail customers, and we had a wholesale rate increase of 10% peak and 10.6% for off-peak. And just so you know the difference, we give different rates for when they take when the wholesale customers take their water. All right, 2017, we are proposing a rate increase for 2017 and a rate increase for 2018. And there's also rate increases for the wholesale customers of 9 and 12 in 17 and 9 and 12 again in 18. And then an increase in 19 for wholesale customers, but no rate increase for our retail customers. If you look down at the chart below, it says scenario 2 because we looked at a multiple of different scenarios to figure out what is the best proposal for the customers that has the lowest impact on them, that is still enables CAW to meet their revenue needs and their pipe replacement needs. And so what we're proposing is no rate increase in 16, adding $1 to the base charge. So the base charge goes from $5.85 to $6.85 in 16 and $7.85 in 17 and then stays there. And then an increase in the volumetric rate above the base charge, again in 17 and 18 with no rate increase in 19. So total impact to the customers, the average retail customer is $1.16 in 2000 and my lines are off by 1. I apologize for that. My lines are off by 1. No, $1.16 in 17 and $1.27 in 18. That's what happens when you change things at the last minute as far as slides. Apologize for that. $1.16 in 17 and $1.27 in 18 are an 8.88% increase in 17 and a 8.89 increase in 18. All those years should just be shifted over 1. Okay, next slide. With this, we're able to increase pipe replacement to about $4.4 million. Okay, that does include relocations. And I just bring up relocations because I just want everybody to be aware that, you know, when the city moves a street or the city broadens a street, sometimes we have to go in and relocate pipes. We're happy to do that to accommodate the city's growth in area, but there does include relocations there. It spreads the volume between the low volume and the high volume customers with the volume increases in pipes and the base charge. It will enable us to contribute about another $100,000 a year to our H2O program, which is our Help to Others program, to help people who are having trouble paying their water bills. There is no retail rate increase in 16 or in 19, but it enables us to allow our average increase in the O&M budgets of 1.9%. And the scenario of all the scenarios we looked at had the lowest long-term impact to the customer bill while giving us the money for increased pipe replacement. Next slide, please. We're going to focus on galvanized pipe. We got a little galvanized pipe. We're going to focus on AC pipes. We're going to focus on the big pipes because they're the ones that are critical for service, that are over 90 years old. Okay? We're going to focus on the critical areas, which is our hospitals, areas south of 630 because of the age of some of the pipes down there, the central business district, and other areas as they come about. And I do think we're going to have to look at gradually increasing funding for pipe replacement in the long run. Okay? You all, when you were talking about transit and taxes and what have you, talked about comparisons between the various cities. So if you'll go to the next slide. When you look at a study that Memphis Light Gas and Water does, Little Rock is third in the various charges for residential water bills of all these area cities. And if you go to the next slide, please. Little Rock is number 2 behind Jonesboro Water and Light. And Jonesboro, as in many areas that has electric combined with their water use, is able to use the efficiencies from the electric and the revenues generated electric to offset water bills. But there, Little Rock and North Little Rock are second among the cities. And you see some of our surrounding and wholesale partners. If you look on down there, you'll see Bryant's down there, Cabot's down at the very bottom with the highest rates. So that's the comparison of area rates. So water is of good value to the citizens of Little Rock. We want it to continue to be that way. We are very conscious about keeping water affordable and making sure that we can provide the needs of our customers. Last slide. 2 things to think about. We are going to have a 2017 bond issue. It is not in these rate measures because we will not have any debt service prior to 2019. That 2017 bond issue is for upgrades and replacements of aging facilities at the Ozark Treatment Plant, which is in bad need of some upgrades and treatment. It has not had a substantial upgrade or rehabilitation since it was built. And the I-30 bridge. And I was talking to Director Webb about this earlier, but the I-30 bridge is going to have an impact on us. We have pipes hanging on the I-30 bridge. If we have to take the I-30 bridge out of service, we'll have to pull those pipes down and then replace those pipes when the new bridge gets put in. And our engineer's estimate is a little over $9 million. On bond issues, I'd also like to say we just sent notice over last week of doing a refinancing of existing debt that we hope to save a little over $400,000 a year in debt service. So that will certainly help keep down future rate increases. And we continue to look at all of our outstanding debt to see if we can refinance with today's low interest rates and continue to save money. We have done several refinancings already to save money, and these are now become available, and we plan on doing that. And with that, I will take questions.
Thank you very much, Tad. Director Hancock, you're recognized, please.
Scott, will you pull up the last slide, please? How many of these cities are buying their water from us?
Sherwood doesn't buy, they get our water from us, but they're a retail customer. They're about in the middle of the pack. City of Bryant is fourth from the bottom, Jacksonville is third from the bottom, and Cabot is at the bottom. So those three cities down there.
Does Benton get their water from us?
No, they do not.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Alexander does too, I guess, don't they?
Yes, sorry, but they're a retail customer at outside city rates.
Okay, Director Wright, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bohannon, for your presentation, very clear. However, I do have a question regarding the bond issue.
Okay.
If you can have a bond issue to replace your aging facility, why not aging pipes?
We do some aging pipes through bond issues. You can look at the cost and you can either pay the debt service on the cost or you can look at the cost for replacement out of rates. And given the lower quantities on an average annual basis, it makes financial sense. Since you're only replacing we're not going to replace all $130 million worth of pipe in a short period of time, that it makes sense to go out and do a bond issue and pay interest on that money because you're going to borrow that money right off the bat and start paying interest on it immediately. And pipes are a pay-as-you-go type thing because of the amount that you do per year.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Director Fortson, you're recognized, please.
Just to reemphasize what you went through in your presentation, Tad, and I don't remember what page, what slide that was on, but during this time frame you showed us, you have wholesale increases in the 8 to 10% range as compared with the consumer increases. Is that sort of continuing the pattern that you discussed with this board a couple of years ago when we talked about the lack of parity between those two?
It is.
So,
If you remember, we actually had a wholesale rate increase this year. And that was part of the presentation that we started and the board actually approved in 2014. And that's continuing the increases on the wholesale customers to the area that we talked about in 2014.
but you have no control over what those people charge at retail.
That is correct.
So, thank you.
Director Campuris, you're recognized, please.
Well, two things. Going back to that same slide of wholesale users that you have.
Slide 29.
And I think we probably discussed this sometime, Tad, but is there what is the difference in the rate that we charge our wholesale users versus our owner users?
In 2016, I'll use 2016 numbers. Our wholesale rate is $1.31 per 100 cubic feet. and our large volume customer is $1.23. So, and so our large volume customers' wholesale rate is actually less than our large volume inside city wholesale user rate is actually less than our wholesale customer rate. And then you also have to remember that our inside city customer rates include meter reading, pipe replacement, all those issues where with the wholesale meter customer, then they've got to pay for all that within their own system, and that's why the rates for the outside city are higher.
Well, sometime, could you get us, and this would be hard to obtain, but if those costs are what make the difference in the difference, say, with Sherwood or something like that, how much more? Or if they are generating cash on cash by the rate we're charging?
I can get you their rates, I can get their budgets. As you all know, I used to be a lawyer.
I know.
And I used to work with some of those cities, and I can tell you that, for instance, the city of Cabot, they set their rates as low as they can possibly set their rates to cover their cost.
Well, I would imagine they would to encourage growth, but I mean, there's a dramatic difference on that slide on what the rates are. Yeah, thanks, Scott. I mean, if you look at $29 versus $13.10, that is a pretty remarkable difference. Secondly, the second question, and I think I know the answer to this, is that the rates between Little Rock and North Little Rock are now normalized. They're the same, right?
That's correct.
So we have gone through that period of awkward adjustment.
That is correct.
And then the third one has not got anything to do with what you talked about. Could you give us an update on where the deal is with Lake DeGray and ascertaining that money, and have we gone ahead and formalized and paid for that right before we lose it?
Sure. We have provided notice to the Corps that we would like to acquire and pay for, and we want to pay them. We want to give them the money. The Corps has been going through its own changes, and we've been dealing with this for the couple of years. For instance, attached to the contract is a form contract to acquire the water on our option agreement. And their initial response was, well, we're going through a period working with Centers of Excellence, and we're not using that as our water acquisition contract anymore, and bear with us, and we're moving forward. We just talked about this at our last commission meeting, which was 2 weeks ago, and we're running out of patience with the Corps, and we're attempting to move forward. It is in the budget to acquire that property.
Well, I think, as we said at the meeting a long time ago, for the long-term health of this community, we have to have that. And to procrastinate and lose that right by not securing it, a promise unfortunately, as you know, in your former profession as a lawyer, just because you think that's what they say now doesn't mean that they can't change it later on in regulation. And I would urge you, as you do these other things, for the long-term health of this region and this community, we get that right in writing, and it's ours, and we don't have to worry about it again.
Director Campiris, I hear you loud and clear.
Goes up every time I look at it. Director, Vice Mayor Hines, you're recognized, please.
Tad, congratulations on your appointment. I think we had lunch a few days before that happened, so I don't think I've talked to you since then, but congratulations. And I, too, will jump on Dean's bandwagon that if you would like some help from our congressional delegation with getting the Corps off the dime, I think Congressman Hill and both of our senators would be more than happy to assist us.
They are well apprised.
Okay.
I may call you back on that. They're well apprised of the issue we have in keeping them. They are.
And it is election season, so they're less likely to say no.
They are looking forward to the issue getting to Washington, actually, and that's what we're
Okay.
trying to get it out of the Little Rock office up to Washington.
Super. A couple questions, just based on, Director Ed had a question about using bond funds, and I understand. Does CAW have the same access that Little Rock Wastewater does to the state's revolving loan funds, which one of the benefits to that is you don't actually have to start paying interest on it until you draw the money?
We do. In fact, that's when I said on the 2017 bond issue, its debt service is not included in this rate cycle through 2019, because if we borrow the money from ANRC in 2017, we won't start debt service until 2020.
Okay, great. I just know that's
Yes.
something that they've accessed, and it's been kind of a game changer for that utility as well, so. I
We have
figured you-
about, just so you know, we have about 4 loans from them, and we're looking at another one. Right now, because of our credit rating, are able to go out in the private. We just look at the interest rates.
Right,
To us, it's
right.
just a straight choice of interest rates.
I just know that when you do a bond issue, you got to, you don't use the money, you already got to start paying interest on it. So
Correct.
there's a trade-off too. And I know you and I talked about this, but, my concern's your O&M budget, and we had this discussion. And really not as much on the maintenance side of the budget, but on just I guess in the private sector, we call it your corporate overhead. So do you have a plan going forward to look at your efficiencies and your head count and making sure that you're right-sized going forward?
Definitely. We've already started. I've been on the job a month. As you know, we are in the, Maumelle joins our system on March 1st. They won't be getting CAW water for a little while, but they are joining our system. But we are looking at our org chart regularly, looking at our salary levels, looking at our overall employee and cost, and we're making sure we try to keep a handle on that.
I think the thing that we've always looked at too is that sometimes when you cut to the bond financing, you're not always efficient. So I always preach more efficiency than anything else. I think efficiency leads to those cost savings is kind of the road. The only other question I had is, we've seen in the past with a couple of our wholesale customers deciding that they would go outside our agreement to secure other water sources, and it's led to one entity, I think, not wanting to pay up to the contract they were on. Do you foresee these rate increases on our wholesale customers having an impact on their consumption? Did you guys, in economics we call that price elasticity. I'm sure that did y'all use Raftelis to do
Yes.
the rate study? Did they consider the impact on, where the threshold is before we start seeing a change in behavior from our wholesale customers?
I will do both. I will say, yes, we consider it. Yes, we look at it. Do we have an exact study? No, but I will tell you, even when our wholesale prices were cheaper than what they could get their water from elsewhere, they still would look to go get their water from elsewhere.
Okay, super. That's it. Thank you.
Director Wyrick?
Thank you, Mayor. Ted, thank you for the presentation, and congratulations on your new job.
Thank you.
I think this is probably the first time that we've had details on the miles and miles of pipe that need to be replaced. I'm not sure that in all your predecessors, they have brought this information to us. I know we worried when we combined the two companies, Little Rock and North Little Rock, that maybe Little Rock ratepayers would be paying for North Little Rock pipes, but it looks like we're equally in trouble, both sides of the river. I'm wondering, we always worried about the sewer company because we had a lawsuit and that was before us all the time. Somebody laughed. And so, we actually knew that they had some maintenance issues, but from what I've heard through the number of years I've been on the board is that the CAW was keeping up with their maintenance on pipes, and I heard about the redundant facilities. If one line breaks, you've got another line. So, since you're the new person, are you sharing everything with us so it makes everything look better as you go? You get all these replacements done, or has this been out there for us and it's just not been brought to us?
I do believe the map with all the red lines has actually been here before even, but I can't promise you that it was focused on, and I didn't go back and look at all the old tapes or anything.
To me, it's been all about getting more lines in the ground for other cities than it has been for the maintenance side.
I think to adequately respond to your question, the issue is not that it's not there, it's not that it's been hidden or otherwise not discussed by it, but we're just reaching that point. I mean, when you buy a new car, you don't think about repairing it at all. When it gets to be 4 years old, you may think about making a few repairs. When it gets to be 8, 10, 12 years old, then you think about making those repairs or replacing that car becomes more critical in your brain, and we've just reached that point. So it's risen up in importance in that we need to look at it and consider it.
But not since you've taken this job, and I don't recall in the last 2 or 3 years that we've heard anything about this. Does anybody else recall this coming before us with the maintenance issues? I just don't recall that.
The spreadsheet that I showed you where we do the analysis of all those pipes,
Yes.
just so you know, that work was begun in 2013. So the utility's been looking at it.
Okay, and I mentioned the redundant facilities. I was always very proud of that, the fact that we, if one line broke, then we had, in most cases, we had another line that we could turn around and still provide water service for our citizens. I think that's a win-win for everybody. But has that contributed to the miles of pipes that we need to replace now?
A lot of the redundancy has been built into more frequent years, and so it's not reaching its replacement age, but some of the older pipe is. The other thing is, remember with redundancy is it's an ability to lessen the severity of the shutoff. It's not that in front of your house there is not 2 water lines. There is only 1 water line. But there is a redundancy and a valving system so that maybe we only have to shut off 1 block if there's a rupture in that pipe. So the redundancy is not that there's 2 pipes for every service, but it's that it creates the ability to impact fewer people when we do have to shut off service.
Okay, so I had a different opinion of what redundancy was, but that's the way it was explained to me as
Okay.
best I can remember. Okay, well, I think you need to continue to talk to us about this as time rolls along, because it appears that in the older part of the city, we have lots of lines that need to be replaced, and I'm glad you brought it to us so we can help you with looking at how we need to do that. So, at any rate, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. We will certainly be back here to keep you all informed.
Thank you, Tad. A follow-up question I have, somewhat related to Vice Mayor Hines' question on the wholesale rates. I know that about a year and a half ago, we talked about the cost allocation question in terms of different structures.
Mm-hmm.
Has that conversion been completed and taken place relative to the different model of being able to determine the calculation of rates for our out-of-town customers, either whether they're wholesale out-of-town customers or out of, the ones such as Sherwood?
We have not replaced our wholesale water contract, so we still use a WWA standard methodology for determining wholesale rates. We did use Raff Tillis Rate Consultants, who came in, and they do a full analysis and allocate costs based on services and for instance, all of our customers, including our wholesale customers, pay for a portion of the cost of the treatment plants. Wholesale customers pay for large transmission lines to get their lands in. But yes, we have been making the transition in the methodology used, but we're still using an AWWA methodology.
So help me a little bit with this. I thought we had discussed with Mr. Rich that the CAW board was going to be moving to a different cost allocation relative to the ability for the primary system owners, the city of Little Rock and the city of North Little Rock, to recoup in some way or recapture in some way some of the capital costs that was involved in in the project.
We have a rate of return built into our rates now for our wholesale customers calculations so that the citizens of Little Rock are getting a rate of return on their investment.
So,
And that is the element that you were asking about, and that is what has contributed to those 10%, 10%, 10%, and then 5% rate increases over a 4-year period of time that you saw for the wholesale customers. I apologize that I didn't get where you were going at first.
okay, all right, so that has transpired.
Yes,
How
sir.
long has that been in place?
The rate model for all the future years was just completed this fall, and that's where the rate increases for 16, 17, 18, 17, 18, and 19 came in place. We knew there was going to be a rate increase, and that's why we had already put in the rate increase in 16 before the rate model was complete.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. I wanted to get an update on that. Director Campiris, is that your question as well, wasn't it? Yes, okay. Oh, very good. Well, congratulations on your new appointment, Tad. I know you're going to do a great job, and thank you for the update on the Flint water crisis. This is a very important issue. I just got back from a meeting with some fellow mayors, and the issue of water and the issue of the travesties in Flint are something certainly that we want to make sure that we never have to face, and certainly want to try and reach out as good neighbors to help the citizens of Flint. And so I'll be visiting with you a little bit more about that to see if there's a way where Central Arkansas Water can reach out to their neighbors and friends and help them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. If you need anything, please give me a call. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our presentations. We can now move on to the agenda. Let me first ask about additions. You've got a couple of additions here. If there's no objection, if you look over those two that there for, one's from Auto Parts and the other one is a contract with Mid-Arc Roofing for the Little Rock Zoo. If there's no objection, we can add those to the consent agenda? No objection. Okay. Director Fortson, I see you've got your light on. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On behalf of Director Cazard, who could not be here tonight, he asked me to please distribute and ask for inclusion next week his ordinance that he's mentioned to us several times for creation of a salary commission. He's done quite a bit of research in this and will be prepared to answer your questions next week. But on his behalf, I'd move adding this to our agenda for next week.
Is there any objection to adding this to the agenda?
No objection.
All right. Director Adcock, you're recognized, please.
Yes, I have a question on item 2.
I'm going to move to that in just a second. Okay. Mr. Moore, did you have one thing that was going to be added as well? Do you want to address that issue? While we're talking about additions.
Mayor, members of the board, in December, the board passed a sole source ordinance in the amount of $86,000 for ticker tape sign. We're moving forward with the sign, but it's going to be a little larger than originally planned. So we need to increase the ordinance by $8,000, and it's all grant funded, but because it said not to exceed, I need to come back with that. So Mr. Carpenter will have that prepared on Friday.
Okay, very good. We'll make sure that everybody gets, take that pipe with you, huh?
You could have left it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and have that added as well. Okay, now we can move on to the other items on our agenda. I'm sorry, Director Adcock, if you hit your call button again, please. Very good. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Moore, on item 2, what other right-of-ways in Little Rock do we hire out to be cut and cleaned?
Director Adcock, these are the only ones. We've done this traditionally, I'm not sure, for at least many, many years. It's just from a capacity standpoint.
Well, our other buildings and everything has to wait for the weed lot crew to get around to cutting it. I don't think that in Ward 6, that roundabout is cut by a private organization.
Okay, these aren't roundabouts. Let me, John, if you would come forward and talk about.
And I know that we have lots of citizens that adopt different things in the city, so I can't understand why we've selected these two, John, to hire an outside company when you have all kinds of equipment in Public Works to cut and clean.
Director Adcock, these particular two locations are very long, extensive grass areas. This is the part of Chenal Boulevard where it has the median in the center and then grass areas along the edges of the road. It's a continuous mowing operation. I think that's why these have been singled out to be done outside of the city's normal workforce doing that work. It would be a continuous thing. We'd be working on this instead of working on all the other areas of the city that we try to get to.
Well, one thing I think about is along University Avenue in front of Broadmoor, from, I guess it's Broadmoor Street down to the one by the County Extension Service that always looks like a junkyard. I think you just have to wait and wait and wait for that to be cleaned and cut. And other ones, so I just find it real unusual that we've got two in a certain area of Little Rock that is cut by a private individual.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Wright, you're recognized.
Mr. Moore, since the precedence is here for us to do this, we're about to put in the Barrow Road streetscape, and I need some type of maintenance assistance with maintaining that. And I would like you to consider implementation of a crew, possibly using our reentry program, just like you did with the sidewalk program, as a means of maintaining the roundabout at 36 and Romine, as well as the streetscape that we're about to put in. And that streetscape is going to cost us at least $2 million, so the investment is going to be there, and it would need to be properly maintained. And if we can establish a separate line item for this, I don't see why we can't do the same thing for the Barrow Road corridor and the 36th Street roundabout. So I'd appreciate it if you would let me know what I need to do, if that needs to be something separate and apart like this is, or if it's something that you can do within the Community Programs Department, or however you would choose to do it. But I do also find that this is very interesting, because the perception is from my constituents is that in that part of the city, things get done a whole lot quicker than they can get things done whenever we call to get something cut or cleaned or what have you. And since it's being done privately, I can see why that's not standing in line behind everybody else. So I think I spoke to you not long ago about Barrow Road, or either in Canis, trying to get that cleaned and picked up, and I still don't think it's been done on Canis from Barrow down to 12th Street. I don't think that's been cleaned or picked up or anything, or cut. So it's just a perception that what I see this as an issue. But please let me know what, if that is possible to have that crew developed, and then that crew can go all over the city cleaning and cutting, in addition to what our Public Works staff is doing, not just on Barrow, but on Canis, other parts of the city that need areas cleaned and cut as well. And we'd be helping our reentry. Thank you.
Director Wyrick, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Moore, I agree with those folks over there. I drive Chenal, and it's beautifully maintained, and I go out to Ward 7, and we get sprayed, and sometimes we get cut. So that's the street cut. So I would like to propose for you to do a contract for the streets in Ward 7, the major corridors that we have open ditches, and they're terribly maintained, to have a contract for my street so that they look as beautiful as these other streets do. I'd like to see that by Tuesday so I can vote on this. Because, we're on a need to serve basis. I mean, we'll complain about something and then, maybe we'll get sprayed or maybe we'll get cut. I mean, it's just terrible maintenance in our right of ways. So, I brought you out to Ward 7 last summer where, we had some areas that were maintained by property owners, but then, we decided to spray them and kill all the vegetation. So I just think that's a terrible way to maintain the road right-of-way. And I agree with my other directors. I think you need to come up with a contract for Ward 7 by Tuesday. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Hines, you're recognized.
Well, I can tell you for one, that section, that particular intersection is not well maintained. I don't know how Bruce and staff came up with this, but the rest of Chenal Parkway from that intersection west is maintained by an improvement district. It's done privately, and that's why it looks so nice. The rest of Chenal Parkway going back east is maintained by the city, and I would say it's not maintained any better or any worse than any other part of the city. But this perception that we're getting special treatment out there is not valid. And the fact that this intersection I come through every day, at best is maintained once or twice during the summer, is when they cut it. It gets high, no different than any of your neighborhoods, and I don't think that you're being singled out. But I take exception, Director Warwick and Director Adcock, as you guys took exception with my comments the other day that the streets are paved with gold and maintained to a level that's any better. The areas that are maintained to the level that you cite are maintained privately by an improvement district that private property owners maintain out there. So, and that's basically from west of this intersection forward. This is a public area that's the beginning of Rock Creek. So, Bruce, I don't know how staff came up with it. It wasn't at my request, so, but I'm just, I don't like being picked on because we're West Little Rock, and we've had some comments about that, and I will refrain from commenting about other sections of the city.
Bruce, apparently there's some confusion about what length of this roadway is being covered by this contract. If you would maybe provide just a diagram of that for the meeting on Tuesday.
Sure, I'm going to make it easy. I'm just going to pull this down and we'll regroup.
I will tell everyone that Keep Little Rock Beautiful, their cleanup day is coming up, and it sounds like you all have lots of streets you want to add to their list, so I would recommend that you get that out to the city manager, and he'll make sure that that group have a chance to go do cleaning. I got stopped last night in the grocery store by at least 2 or 3 different people who told me that Cantor Road was pretty terrible in terms of cleanup, and I told them that we were gonna put that on the list. I guess the state highway is supposed to maintain the cleanup on that. Is that right, Bruce? I don't know what we do, Mr. Honeywell, to try and let them know about that, but it does get pretty trashy along that route, and I know we have to continue to call them and ask them to try and get somebody out there. I know the Department of Correction at times has had people out there doing it. Maybe you could call them and see if we can't get somebody to go out there and do some of the pickup. Thank you. Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
I think Mr. Moore probably got thank you, Mayor. But I wanted to ask Mr. Moore, where's the funding coming from? I know you pulled it, but where would the funding come from?
Come out of the Public Works Operation Budget, Director Hendricks.
Okay. You all know I don't mince words, but, and no disrespect to Lance, but I see it as discrimination. Discrimination of services for communities. You all don't want to talk about it, but that's what it is. Why is Mr. Moore going to make sure that they get this when we ask all the time and we never get it? That's all I got to say.
Mayor, I'm going to check. I suspect that the city may have agreed to do this when the situation for the building of Chenal was done. The city did not build Chenal Parkway. It was built by private developers, and this may be a part of that. I don't know that. I could be wrong. and I will check.
Would you check into it and let us know? Director Adcock, you're recognized, please.
Mayor, I was going to ask the same thing that you did, that we get a map, so we'll see what Director Hines is talking about. Is not as nice as the other part of it that is kept by the Improvement District.
All right.
Thank you.
Director Wyrick, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Moore, the $60,000 for this location, what is our total budget for street cutting, that kind of thing? What's our total budget for that?
Director, I would have to, I'll provide that, but I do want to clarify, this is a potential of a 3-year contract, so it was $20,000, not 60.
I still would like to know what
Well, yeah, we'll
what
get
the
that.
budget is, the yearly budget is for this type work. Thank you.
Director Wright, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, even though you pulled that off the agenda, I still would like for you to investigate the reentry crew as far as maintenance, because I had been planning to talk with you about this, just like you developed the sidewalk program. I still think this is something viable that can help our major thoroughfares in all the wards, and that would perhaps assist Mr. Honeywell with his maintenance of these thoroughfares. And for Mr. Carpenter, even if the city agreed to maintain that, wouldn't that be in line with the regular maintenance that the rest of the city gets? Did we say we were going to do something separate for that corridor that we're not doing?
I'll just have to look at the documents.
Okay, but like, I said that to say, even if we agreed to maintain it, they still need to be a part of the regular maintenance, just like the rest of the city. Is that,
That's not necessarily true. I mean, we just passed a contract for one park and maintenance in that one park. That's not the same for all parks in the city.
and what
because
park is that?
MacArthur, because of obligations that we had undertaken several years ago.
Can
Actually,
you
I
provide
think-
that to me? Because I have parks that I can't, that don't seem to be maintained consistently. So you just opened up another avenue that I'm wanting to talk about. But I just wanted Mr. Moore to know that even though he pulled that, I still want to know about that establishment of a program to maintain our thoroughfares, including that Barrow Road corridor. Thank you.
Director Hendricks, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm getting ready to go, that's all.
Okay. All right, well, let's see if we can turn the page. And if you would, look at the next 3 resolutions. Are there any questions about those 3?
Number 5.
Mr. Moore, Director Wright has asked for a little briefing on Resolution 5, please.
As we've done in the past, the city issued a request for qualifications for a individual or company to assist with the city's legislative agenda in the upcoming session. And also there are potentially 2 special sessions. So as I said, as we've done in the past, this is to assist the city's legislative process.
And then number 6, ma'am.
Presentation, please, on ordinance number 6.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, item 6 is an annexation of approximately 9.4 acres on what is the east side of Canis. If you go start at Kirby in the Cooper Orbit Canis intersection, you continue to the northwest. That area on the east is outside the city, and this one tract is now proposed for annexation. Several years ago, a single family subdivision was approved, 41 acres, 41 lots. And this is obviously contiguous to the city limits on the north and the east. It's in close proximity to Baker School, which is just a little further to the northwest. We did our normal review. It's gone through the county, all our reviewing agencies, and no issues were raised. Staff is recommending approval, and Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of the annexation.
Any cost to existing customers in this area?
No,
No increase for?
no.
Vice Mayor Hines, you recognize, please.
Tony, this property's already been cleared, correct? They've been working on it for several months?
Yes, Vice
Okay.
Mayor, yeah.
And the other question I got is, are they doing the required half-street improvements along that section? Do you know?
Vice Mayor, I assume as part of the plat, but I can't tell you for sure because it was in, I think, 2000.
Can you get me, just verify that for me before I vote on this? Because I'm going to have a problem annexing this in if they are not doing the half-street improvements in that section. So if you just give me confirmation of that in our packet this week, I'd appreciate it.
Was that item 6? Yeah, item 6, yeah. Okay, we can now move on to items 7 through 10. If you'll look at those, and let me ask if there's any questions on any of those. Well, let's see, they're grouped at the, and items 6 through 10 are grouped. I'm certain that if item 8 is going to be discussed, that we'll need to hold that separately. So, Madam Clerk, if you'll just note that, please. Anything else on those items? If not, we can look at ordinance number 11. Yes, Director Campiris, if you'll turn on your microphone, please. Yes.
Since it's nice and calm right now and there's not 5,000 people here, could Tony give us a quick summary of that Brody Creek annexation and their approval of it?
They are meeting tonight.
I'm talking about the city's, the planning commission and our staff's thoughts on the subject.
Oh, okay. You want to know about the staff recommendation on this item? Okay. All right, back on item 8.
Director, Mayor, members of the board, yeah, I think the applicant last week, Friday, submitted some additional information that we really have not been able to go through. We just got it Friday. I mean, so Tony can give you his thoughts on what we previously had, but he did submit some additional information, so I don't know what you would like.
I think what Director Campiris is suggesting is that the intensity of the dialogue last time made it difficult for everybody to focus kind of on what the planning staff is recommending approval, and apparently it was a 7-4 vote with the Planning Commission. Maybe you could give us just a status report on, or a reflection on that issue, and then if there's new information, I would assume that if this moves forward on Tuesday, then we'll be having additional questions about whatever new information the staff received.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. Item 8, sorry. Item 8, as we all know, is property located on Bowman Road, on the west side of Bowman, north of the intersection with West 36th Street. It's a 74-acre tract And the proposal before you is a planned development with a mixed-use concept. 23 acres for multifamily, that's the immediate, excuse me, the immediate part of the development. An area north of that, approximately 27 acres, is shown on the overall plan for residential, possibly single-family, at a density not to exceed 6 units per acre. And then on the property.
Todd, could you bring up, I'm sorry, could you bring up the maps on that, please? And would you repeat that again on the second 27 acres? What is planned for residential, what?
At a density not to exceed 6 units per acre.
Is that single-family residential?
Yes, that's what we refer to as residential low density. And then for approximately 11 and a half acres on the portion of the property that has frontage on Bowman, the proposal is either O1 quiet office uses or again, residential not to exceed 6 units per acre. And then, Mr. Carter, if we can go to the sketch, that shows these different areas. And then adjacent to the proposed multifamily, there's a large area of what's identified as open space. That will be incorporated into the site plan when it's submitted for permitting for the multifamily, should this development be approved. So that adds, that acreage is approximately 11, 12 acres. If we can go back to the land use plan. You can see on the land use plan, and then first of all, directly south of this is existing multifamily development, the point at Brody Creek. And the proposed multifamily as part of the 73-acre tract will take its access through the existing multifamily development. But on the land use plan, you can see probably a little bit less than half of the site is shown as RM, which is residential medium density, up to 12 units per acre. So the plan does identify this as a higher intense or more intense use of the land. But also, if you look at the overall land use plan in this area, the plan recognizes, and I'm just going to, the general 36 Bowman Road vicinity for more intense uses. One area is shown for mixed use, which currently has a multifamily development under construction. Another area is shown as suburban office. Another area is shown as mixed office commercial. So again, and this goes back a number of years, that the city recognized this area for more intense land use pattern. So with that in mind, staff reviewed the proposal, and we felt it was reasonable. The plan does recognize some of the property for a higher density use, and we've always felt that mixed-use developments are something that should be encouraged. They're the type of use that you want to see in the city. The Planning Commission, as was pointed out by the mayor, did vote 7 ayes, 4 noes, to recommend approval of the request that's before you.
What is the, on the multifamily 23 acres, what is the density? How many units per acre?
With that open space area, it works out to maybe, about 13 units per acre. If you add that additional area, that will be part of the site.
Why would you add that area?
Because it is part of the site plan.
I see. Okay. And that's actually designed as a buffer between the single-family 27 acres that's planned as a second phase?
Yes.
And on the north side of this property, was there any buffer there along Olds Lane or whatever that is right there?
No.
Oh, I mean, I guess those houses on Brody Creek Trail, Is there any buffer there between whatever's planned? Is that 23 acres already, is there already a land use plan for that? Is there already a single-family development plan for that?
No,
identified?
and those areas that are just shown as proposed uses this time, that's all that's being improved. Once a development plan is formulated, then that will have to come back through both the Plan Commission and the board as a revision to the approved plan, should that happen.
Those 27 acres.
And also the acreage that's shown adjacent to Bowman Road.
Okay. Director Campuris, do you have any more questions for Mr. Bazinski? Vice Mayor Hines, you're recognized, please.
So Tony, I just want to clarify, because these maps, we're looking at one east-west and the other one's north-south configuration. So basically, Brody Creek and Woodlands Edge are still going to be, the existing land use plan shows that single family, correct? Except for
Yes.
the front. The frontage part shows future use, medium density residential, which would be higher density multifamily. So he is shifting this frontage acreage basically back to the west and then shielding it from any single family with open space, correct?
That's correct, Vice Mayor.
Okay. And then the Brody Creek neighborhood is essentially going to keep the same zoning that they had, which is MF6 or low density
Well,
residential, which is the
Right,
land use.
development at a
right,
density not to exceed the
right.
6 units.
Which
per-
is what the existing land use plan would call for, correct? Okay. That's what I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Well, I guess one of the conclusions is that if you're using that open space and you're saying that the apartments would be in essence an MF13 and the mixed residential mixed use with a higher density would be MF12, is that really the distinction?
I'm sorry, Mayor,
Well, based on the land use plan, you mentioned that the frontage acre was for a higher density in terms of the land use plan.
currently,
And I
the
think you
plan,
said that was like the equivalent of an MF12,
right, up to 12 units per acre for
12 units
RN.
per acre. And what he's proposed with the open space, in essence with the apartments, is an MF13, right?
Yes,
Okay, so I'm just,
approximately. I didn't work out the density per acre, but it's close to that,
I
yes,
see,
sir.
okay. Director Wyrick, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to share an experience that I had Saturday afternoon about 3 o'clock. I turned onto Bowman Road south, and there was a line of traffic that was trying to go north to Canis Road, and that line of traffic went past this existing apartment complex. And there was not a wreck, there was not any distraction along the side of the road that I could tell, because I was looking to see why are there so many cars in line on this street. So they were going north toward Canis Road, and it was just car after car after car, and it actually stopped at where these existing apartments are. So there's a lot of traffic, and what that means to the neighborhood is they're not able to get out onto that road, and that's a big concern for them. And if I was sitting in that line to try to get to Canis Road, I don't know where you go to get off of Canis Road to get out of the traffic unless you just depart through the neighborhoods there, which is going to increase the traffic there. So I experienced the traffic on a Saturday afternoon and just wanted to share that before I forgot it, because I am over 60 now.
Well, there's no question that improvements to Bowman Road are needed, and, there's going to be development regardless of whether it's this project or some other project. And I guess, that's, I don't know whether I guess this project's going to improve the Boundary Street improvements, are they not? I mean, that's part of the project.
And they're going to do their entire frontage as part of the multifamily phase of it.
Yeah.
They're not going to
So-
wait until,
I mean, there's a lot of need to improve it, notwithstanding whether anything gets developed here. But certainly, as you said, Director Wyrick, there's going to continue to be those kind of development pressures. I guess when those apartments get built over there to
Right.
the east, that's going to even further exacerbate it. So
Right, and then the cut-through traffic into the neighborhoods and the neighborhoods trying to get out on Canis
Yeah.
Road. They'd have to have a good Samaritan let them in traffic to go north at that particular time of the day. And I don't know if that's common for every Saturday afternoon or every day or whatever, but there was a lot of cars that were backed up.
Director Campuris?
Tony, and not for tonight, but if, right now, the developer has rights to do without asking us anything, is that right?
Director Campuris, no, I mean, he has a right to do a single-family subdivision. It's zoned R2 single-family. What's in front of you is what the land use plan is recommending.
So right now, his rights are what? Just single family?
Single-family, that's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. And then if you compare the land use plan that you suggested, can you give me the difference in the number of people coming in and out of there?
In terms of vehicles or?
Or what's the number of people that would be on that 70-something acres?
With what?
Just an average, I mean, and not tonight.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just trying to, it is a very confusing piece of land on what his rights are and what he can do.
Well, yeah, I guess the question is on 74 acres, how many single-family homes could he put on there? 500 lots?
Well,
Not necessarily.
Well,
the MF6, right, would.
that's,
Of course, there's certain topographical issues that
Right.
probably would.
I'm just trying to get, I mean, that's the reason I wanted to go through this exercise, because everybody throws all these numbers out, but I want something we can say is factual.
we provided you some numbers in that January 28th memo. And we used for if it was left R2 single family, typically that's a density of 4 to 5 units per acre.
Right.
So anywhere from about 300 to 370. Again, that's just a ballpark figure that we
And
use.
again, my whole desire is to get something that we can all agree is true before we get here next week and slings and arrows start getting.
Well, Tom, I have a follow-up question. I assume if this application is not approved with the moratorium in place, then that would prohibit the developer from even building single-family homes there. Is that correct or is that incorrect?
No. The moratorium deals with multifamily.
Pardon?
Moratorium only deals with multifamily.
Director Wright, you're recognized.
Mr. Brzezinski, with what the developer is proposing, the 408, then with what's existing at the point at Brody Creek, and then what he's developing across the street that's currently under construction, and then with what's down the street, that's Mr. Burkhalter's development, can you tell me how many total units that is? So just for the board to be educated on what's coming to that
Director Wright,
corridor?
I'm sorry. I would like to provide that. I know kind of the
get it.
number. I know the one on the east side, I think, is total build out of 500. I'm not sure about the point at Brody Creek or the one further to the, so if it's all right, if we could provide you
Yes.
those exact numbers.
Because I've been told upwards of over 1,000 units, and what Director Wyrick experienced on Saturday is pretty routine. I've tried to go that way on many occasions, and I've had to turn around. I had to inch along until I could get to a street where I could turn into, go in there, find a way to turn around and come back out, to go back out to Colonel Glenn and go up to, what you call it, Nix Road? Is it Nix Road? Whatever that is, Lake Nixon or whatever that is, to try to get out to my other neighborhoods out there whenever I'm trying to go to meetings and things. So it is a pretty consistent backlog of traffic, and if there's a wreck, it's even worse. because there are no shoulders or anything like that, and it's very difficult, and that's what the people are talking about, but your experience is not outside of the norm.
Vice Mayor Hines, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I travel that road twice a day, and sometimes more frequently than that, depending on whether or not I've got business in that area. The main backup stems from the intersection at Canis and Bowman. And in that section, the city has turned back over $200,000 worth of in lieu payments in 2010. So at the bare minimum, the developer in question is is going to improve basically from 36th Street north to the Olds Lane, the full street improvements in that whole section, just about, I think, roughly, once if he was completed. So to throw this off that he bears responsibility for traffic that's almost a mile and a half north of there, that the city's had money to do improvements and failed to do, I think we need to look in our own house and why this section of the roadway hasn't been put on a capital improvement plan. I know it was a target when it was in my ward, but when it's left, I can't say what Director Wrights had as far as impetus for that. But the biggest issue is the intersection at Bowman and Canis where everything backs up. I know for a fact if it gets to be around 3:30 or 4 o'clock and I've got to go north on Canis, that's not the route I go. And if you've ever driven, and I would encourage, I think Director Wright's done it, Director Wyrick, try to cut through Brody Creek through Woodlands Edge and see if you can find your way out. You can't. It is not a cut through. It is not a. Now, I will tell you that the folks in Cherry Creek have a valid argument, but people have been cutting through there for years when that intersection backs up. I know when I get caught, my wife's office is right off a financial center there, and sometimes if I've either had to pick her up or drop some in her office and I catch myself, I will cut through Cherry Creek to avoid that intersection. So, I really think that you've got some folks that are upset and displacing their anger at a developer who's done nothing but what he's actually above and beyond what he's been asked to do as far as street improvements along that section of Bowman. I would tell you, if it was me and I was coming out of Brody Creek, I would go right, go down to Colonel Glenn and get on you could bypass that. A logical person would say you can always make a right turn on that roadway. There's never an issue with traffic going southbound. The other thing, if you look at the traffic study in that area, roughly 7,500 cars already exist south of 36th Street. So that traffic's coming in to go to places of business and financial center. MISO just built their new headquarters in that area. It's not all, and then if you look at the number of rooftops that have been built in Woodlands Edge over the last 5 years, it's close to 600. And Tony, is there a different multiple for single families as far as trips versus multifamily? Is it 2.2 trips for a single family house, or I don't know what the metric is.
There is a difference, but
There is.
I would have to defer
Okay.
that to Mr. Honeywell.
And that's why I jokingly said, well, why don't we just go ahead and put a moratorium on single family housing in that area, because that has had more of an impact on traffic than any of this multifamily. This traffic pattern's been there pre-existing the creation of the apartments at Brody Creek. I mean, I know I drive the corridor every day. I mean, it's part of my commute to pick up and drop off my daughter at gymnastics. I have customers in that area. My wife's office is in that area, and I traverse it frequently. And I have friends that live in Woodlands Edge. I have friends that live in Brody Creek, and I'm constantly back and forth. And I can tell you that even if I know it's an option, I do not cut through. It doesn't save you any time to cut through Woodlands Edge to get to Cana. And that's really where you come out on the west end of Canis. But that's just my viewpoint from my view. Thank you.
Director Campiris.
Mars? West Little Rock.
I'll pass right now.
Director Wright.
Thank you, Director Hines, for your input. And you drive the area, but I live in the area, so I think I probably drive it more than you. But thank you for sharing that when it was a part of your ward, you had it as a priority, but I can see that nothing ever got done. And I can tell you that it is it is something that I'm working on with staff, and as they can, Mr. Honeywell, Mr. Moore, if you would ask Mr. Honeywell to come up and explain to the board what his plans are for that intersection at Canis, because we've been talking about that for a time, and as I understand it, it's a part of the Canis Road improvements that are being planned for. I do believe that that's what was shared with me, and if that's not the case, because Mr. Daters, what's his name, first name? Tim Daters, shared with me some time ago that he had talked with staff about improvements to that intersection that could be made with very little money, and I believe that talked with John the other day when we drove through that area and went through Woodlands Edge, and you are absolutely correct. Anybody that's trying to cut through Brody Creek and go through Woodlands Edge, you will get lost, because I couldn't believe how many twists and turns. If staff hadn't been driving, I definitely would have gotten lost. But if you could explain to me what improvements you are going to make to
Certainly.
Canis.
We always appreciate Mr. Dater's comments on how we're doing stuff around the city. At Canis and Bowman, we are, as all of y'all know, we're doing improvements on Canis, both east and west of that intersection. The Canis lanes, the east-west lanes, are going to be widened. You'll have additional turn lanes. The northbound leg of Bowman that's approaching Canis from the south.
Okay.
That is not going to be improved through the entire master street plan improvements.
Is that the one about the side where the liquor store is?
Yes, ma'am.
You are not improving that?
Well, we're doing some improvements, but it's not being built out to the full master street requirement for an arterial intersection.
And why is that?
Mainly at this point, it's cost. We would have to probably purchase all of the property at all corners of that intersection.
And that would, you anticipate that costing how much?
Haven't done an appraisal of that property, but that property owner seems to feel it's quite valuable. So,
In the millions?
to quote them, yes, they said they wanted at least $1 million for their piece of property.
Just for that one parcel?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Now,
So-
whether or not it appraises for that value, I don't know, but that's discussions we've had with that property owner.
And when you talk with Mr. Daters, he said he had some cost-effective ways to improve that. Have you spoken with him in depth
I
about
don't know
this?
his exact, he didn't speak with me, he spoke with other people on the staff, so I don't know exactly what his suggestions were when it came to that particular leg of the intersection.
So you still, as the director, don't know what he's talking about?
No, ma'am. Not in specific details.
Okay, I'll probably be seeing him in a little bit. I got to get out of here to go to another meeting, but I'll ask him again
Okay.
to share that information with you all. He had told me that he had, and I'd like to see if we could do something that's cost-effective to make some improvements there.
And I will say that what gets suggested by outside parties is not necessarily always the most feasible or cost-effective thing because of the way the city has to operate.
Exactly, and I know that, and I know, but he was talking about just trying to alleviate the stacking that would make things a lot better farther on down, which is what the problem is, the stacking effect that goes on right there. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, John. Okay, Director Kabir, does that take care of your questions? Okay. All right, if there are no other questions about any of these other items, yes, Mr. Moore?
On the public hearing that's scheduled, and I visited with Director Webb about this earlier today, we have worked out a different plan of action with the applicant. They're going to revise their application, which I think then staff will be supportive of. So we're going to request that this be deferred back to the Planning Commission next week.
Okay, we'll look for a motion from the board then to send that back to the Planning Commission. Is there a need?
No, that's good. I thought he was still talking about that item.
No, did you have a comment on that, Mr. Carpenter?
No, I had a new item.
Okay, go ahead.
As I mentioned to you and the city manager, there are 3 franchises which may well be worked out that we've been working on for some period of time. If so, we will put them in the pony for Wednesday, and I'm going to ask that you consider them Tuesday. If they're not worked out, they won't be there.
Okay, we really need to look at those. Pardon? Yes, by Friday. If they're not in our packets by Friday, we'll just have to push them back another time. Okay, Mr. Moore, are we going to do a presentation on the finance report?
March the 8th, Mayor.
Okay, I take that off of the February 23rd, March 8th? Okay. All right, thank you very much. We are now finished.